As a psychologist, I've seen the power of stories on people's lives. Having lived here for almost a decade, I've learned there's one story in particular that anyone born and raised in Appalachia will share with me. Their family history Moonshine Story. In the famous Andy Griffith show from the 1960s, we see a family moonshine story in an episode with two sweet older sisters, the Morrisons, whose flower shop fronts their moonshine business. One day, Sheriff Andy's son Opie brings a mason jar filled with flowers and funny-smelling water to the station. So Andy and his sidekick deputy, the very eager, clumsy, zealous Barney Fife, confront the sisters. And the sisters finally relent to no more moonshine, after which Barney takes his axe and smashes their copper still. The sisters worked hard to portray a polished version to the town, running their respectable flower shop. In reality, out back, they were brewing their famous but illegal elixir recipe as outlaws. I don't know about you, but I can relate to the sisters. Presenting a polished version of myself and outlawing other parts. I do this. I nod my head in agreement while outlawing my disagreement. I don't ask for help for fear of being seen as incompetent. I outlaw uglier things too, like my suspicion that people who are nice to me will take advantage of me, like my judgment of other women's extravagant self-care habits. I do. In psychology, we call this the false self. Everybody has one. A version of us keeping up the respectable front. And in fact, I have someone, a part of me, whose job it is night and day to keep my false self front and center. And I thought I should introduce her to you tonight. I've named her Edna. Edna and I go way back to my earliest years when, as little Natalie growing up, I came to believe that I could and should outlaw parts of myself. So Edna became hyper-focused on any potential criticism, demanding that I work harder to stay ahead of it. So she keeps daily record of all of the times I'm not quite getting it right. In my work, my parenting, my marriage, my friendships. Just talk to you tonight. The truth is, your approval matters to me, even though I just met you. No, Edna. They will still like me if I tell them how much ice cream I eat in one sitting, if I tell them I take out my stress on my family sometimes. They're still here. Let me tell you, Edna can get very, very loud. You can. I know. I know she's getting carried away when shame shows up in the pit of my stomach. Shame is what led to Edna's outlawing parts of me. You know shame too. It's what keeps us trapped in the belief I am less than. And shame also leads me to letting Edna hand over all of my emotional power to anyone and everyone, whether they've earned it, deserve it, don't even know me. It's like handing over emotional power to a Barney Fife. Let me give you an example about a professor whom I will call Professor Barney. I went to college in Chicago, the land of harsh, snowy, cold winters. I needed a job, so I took a position on a snow removal crew because it paid more, and the early hours accommodated my schedule as a college athlete. So one morning at 5 a.m., my assignment took me to the farthest edge of campus, and when I was finished, I had to hustle to get to class. So I put my backpack on over my Carhartt, and with snow shovel in hand, I dashed to get to my class just as the professor was handing out papers to every row. When the professor got to my row, he looked at me and said, "Natalie, why can't you dress more like Paige?" Paige, the girl who sat in front of me, was very stylish and put together, and everything I did not feel in that moment. So that morning, Professor Barney, like Barney Fife, barged into my personal space, judging my lack of beauty, style, and femininity. My 18-year-old self confirmed that, in fact, I was less than. That was the day I named Edna. While her voice had always been there over the course of my life, somehow that day, as she berated me with Professor Barney's shame statement, her voice took over the whole story. Remember? Looking back, I now realize that Professor Barney stands in a world of Barneys. Sometimes respected authorities, parents, teachers, bosses, a coach, well-meaning friends. But Professor Barney was a mess of his own, clueless, unaware, hasty, maybe eager to prove something to himself or others, maybe enslaved to his own version of Edna, unknowingly at my expense. Maybe you have an Edna, a false self version of you fueled by fear and shame, a false self finger pointing out all the ways you have to show up to your Barneys. In fact, entire communities and regions can have a collective false self type of Edna. A version everyone keeps playing and pretending at, not realizing we're deferring to the Barneys of society and the rest of the country, whose careless, short-sighted commentary can reduce an entire region to a shallow stereotype. For Appalachia, the stereotypes show up in characters like those portrayed in Hee Haw, Deliverance, Beverly Hillbillies. If Appalachia hands her emotional power over to the Barneys of society, it's as if her false self, Edna, has her trapped in a belief maybe we are just the stereotype, and therefore only impoverished and limited. But I see Appalachia's deeper story. Her self-sufficiency, complex history, creativity, grit, beauty. And I want you to realize that all parts of the story, the painful, the hard, and the beautiful, are necessary to write a next chapter for flourishing. How do we do that? Well, first, we have to tell our Ednas to stop giving so much attention to the Barneys, that shame is not the whole story, and true self is no longer outlawed. In my work with people, teams, and organizations, one of my favorite tools called the Enneagram reveals 9 false self strategies. The tool shows us where their Edna has been hiding, how true self got lost, and how stress can ramp up Edna. And I want to share a strategy I teach with you tonight. I began to figure out my Edna when I stated my I am not, like this. Because I am good and right and reliable and trustworthy, you will love me, respect me, hire me, and want to be my friend. And because I am not bad, wrong, dishonest, unreliable, you will love me, respect me, hire me, and want to be my friend. See, the I am nots reveal the parts of us we've outlawed, but that are also true. The truth is, sometimes I am right and good, and sometimes I am bad and dishonest. Our very own Tennessee heroine, Dolly Parton, shows us how to live from true self. And she reminds us, find out who you are and do it on purpose. And about moonshine. It used to be shameful, hidden, outlawed, like parts of myself. And while you can't necessarily distill it in your own backyard, Appalachia's corn whiskey has come of age. It's enjoyed, it's celebrated. The Morrison sisters might have even had their own label. Tonight, I invite you to look in the mirror that I gave you and tell shame and your Ednas and your Barneys no more. And tell true self that you're taking a cue from Dolly and that tonight is day one of our true self on purpose story. And Edna and I will drink to that.